What's up, people? This is Aaron England here doing a quick Lightroom edit, and this Lightroom edit is going to be a topical Lightroom edit on the issue of copyright infringement, and the appropriations of intellectual property. So you might be wondering why I would decide to talk about such a subject. Well, I'm talking about the subject specifically because I've been working very closely with copyrighted material as of late, and I think copyright's one of those issues that not a whole lot of people know about, or at least they know the word and the basic concepts, but they're not very educated on the issue and how far it goes. Now, breaking down copyright comes to the idea of what the word means, which copyright means who has the right to copy or send this specific piece of intellectual property to other mediums, whether it be print, electronic communications. Who has the rights to be using this intellectual property? And the answer, more often than not, is the creator of the piece of work. In the case of what I'm doing right now, these are photographs that I took. These are my photos, and therefore they are my copyright. As in, I made them, I own them, they are my property. Now, under most constitutional law, your property means it's yours, and if people want to use it or sell it or whatever, they need your permission to do so. Hence, copyright. You know, if I give people the license to copy this, they are basically paying me to use my images. Now, sometimes copyright can be a little bit more complicated than that, especially when you have larger companies involved. Like, say if I produced a movie for Warner Brothers Incorporated, for example, that movie wouldn't be my copyright. It would be Warner Brothers copyright because I made that movie for Warner Brothers. Or another way to put that is work for hire. So sometimes copyright is owned by larger companies, sometimes it's just owned by individuals. In this case, these images are all owned by me. I did not work for any company or anybody when I took these images. These were taken on my own time. They are my intellectual property. So, why is copyright such a big issue nowadays? Well, it has to do with the internet. I'm not going to pussyfoot around that sort of issue. The internet is kind of a thing that's kind of changed copyright and how we look at it for many different reasons. Mostly because of the ease that it is to take pieces of intellectual property, specifically images or music, and be able to distribute it on a mass scale, a lot of times without the copyright owner's permission. So, how do we combat this? Well, one of the earliest forms of copyright law on, the electronic age that we live in is the DMCA, or the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, which kind of outlines sort of a procedure of how to go about copyright infringement and getting copyrighted material taken down from sites that don't have the right to use it. So basically what happens is if your copyrighted material somehow ended up on a blog, or your music's being used on a share file website, you get to file a thing called a takedown notice to internet service provider, and that internet service provider has to say to the person who's using that web space, saying, hey, you don't have the rights to use that. We want you to take that piece of property down. And if you don't, we'll have to shut you down. And, there's a lot of claims that can come about that. There can be somebody say, I believe that I have the right permissions, or claim something called fair use, which is basically saying, yeah, this isn't my copyright, but I'm using it in a way that is fair, and that I'm using it in a transformative or a editorial manner, or I'm making a certain commentary on the piece of work at hand. And you see that defense be used quite often, and sometimes very legitimately. So obviously that creates an issue, because essentially what the DMCA has done here is that made it to where people have to kind of police themselves and enforce their own copyright themselves, and if it doesn't get resolved, then it has to go to litigation. So it kind of plays this game of cat and mouse between content creators and content users. Now, this issue in recent years has kind of gotten very interesting in how it plays a role in old media and new media, specifically television. So, Recently, a 7-year-long lawsuit recently got settled between Google and Viacom over YouTube, specifically YouTube users who were taking clips from Viacom-owned channels or programming and uploading them onto YouTube. And Viacom sued Google, claiming they were profiting off of users stealing their intellectual property. Which, that was their argument. Google argued, of course, that, hey, we're just kind of the internet service providers here. If we get provided a takedown notice, we will take down those videos, but otherwise, we really have no say in the matter. That lawsuit has now officially ended after 7 years, and we've seen some interesting changes happen on Google's part, especially with YouTube specifically, with the Content ID system. Now, what the Content ID system is essentially copyright owners send some video clips or audio clips to Google, and they have this sort of database where all that information is held, and when people upload a video, the audio and picture from those videos basically gets compared to on those databases, and if Google finds something, it raises the flag and essentially will automatically do whatever the copyright owner has asked for Google to do specifically. And that can be monetized, like they'll leave the video up, but all the money from the ad revenue that somebody would be getting would be going to the original copyright holder. The copyright holder can say, okay, well, we're just going to go ahead and block that video, meaning no one's going to see it. Rudimentary, it's our copyright, we don't want people using it. Or they can literally just leave the video as is, saying, we are aware that this is using our content, but we are going to go ahead and let people use it anyways. All we want is the analytics data to see how popular it is and how much people are watching or listening to our music, yada, yada, yada. So that's basically what the Content ID system does. And, at first glance, that says, great, copyright owners get to decide how their copywritten material is getting used, and they can either, say, hey, we don't want you to use it, which is within their rights, or, hey, go ahead and use it, or at least let us get the kickback from it. Here's the issue. The issue is not so much with the system and what it's trying to do. The system is basically the automated nature of the system, and what's basically wrong with it is it's not done by people. There's not people there who's really using their ideas of how fair use works, or, is this copywritten material actually against the rules kind of thing. And, that creates some problems. So, it's become a really big problem amongst the gaming community on YouTube, who have for a very long time done things like Let's Play videos, where they play a video game, screen capture, and then will actually do commentary on the game while they're playing it, and that would technically, on average, be considered fair use. They would be doing something totally fine because they're commentating on it or doing things in a transformative nature, which video games by their nature are transformative. The experience is different based on the player. And so normally video games are very open and okay with this kind of stuff happening because it's kind of free promotion for them. People get to watch people they enjoy playing video games, and everything's fine, hunky dory, and everybody has a good time. But what happens is, there might be a video clip or an audio clip that might belong to a third party, and it ends up getting caught by the copyright system. Like, this is something that actually happened during when the Content ID rolled out, and people who had gaming channels were getting a lot of their videos claimed for copyright, and having those monetized videos no longer have the money go to them. And basically just what happened is, people were losing money because, they weren't getting money from those videos anymore. And some of the copyright claims weren't even coming from the gaming companies themselves. It was coming from third and fourth party legal teams, not even the people themselves, who were just like, oh, hey, we have a legal right to this, and so we're going to claim it. And there were a lot of game companies saying, we have no idea who these people claiming your videos are, file a counterclaim immediately and whatnot. And that's essentially kind of where we're at now with the YouTube Content ID system. It's a system literally built around kind of just rudimentary policing in copyright, when before it was like, if you want to police your copyright, you have to be very active at policing your copyright. With the example of these photos that I'm using right now, these are my photos. I get to put them wherever I want, however I feel like putting them. But, since I do put them up on social media sites like Facebook and Flickr and other places to kind of promote my work, people can very easily right-click and copy these photos and put them somewhere else. And I have to be very active about policing my copyright. So I understand why it's a thing, but the issue is not so much for the content creators, but it's the content users who may be very much fans of this work and whatnot, and they want to try and show it off and promote it for me or promote me itself. And, part of that comes back to, properly crediting me. Part of that also comes back to, doing something different. Like, it's totally within the realms of legality to do fan art of a popular cartoon series or something like that. That's perfectly fine within copyright law, but it's when you're just taking a clip of that cartoon and putting it on YouTube, that isn't okay. It's one of those things where the legal ground is so very shaky. And I think the way copyright law is set up is specifically set up to where, if you want to protect your copyright, you need to be more active. Or if you want to kind of share this with the world, you can also let that happen and just let it happen. So it's one of those things where, what do you want to do with your property? Do you want your property to stay your property and not let anyone use it or see it? Then that's fine. But you need to actually police yourself accordingly and police your content accordingly. If you're going to be somebody who is like, hey, send this out in the world, let everybody use it, you might want to consider doing a Creative Commons license. What a Creative Commons license essentially does is like saying, hey, you can use this for whatever you want as long as it's not being done for commercial use, meaning you're not trying to sell it or you're not trying to use it to sell something. That becomes a really big dichotomy within how copyright law works nowadays. Is it being used for commercial purposes or is it being used for editorial purposes? Now, the difference between editorial and commercial uses usually comes down to money. But the problem is nowadays with, how online ads and everything does, people can make money off of using content, be it not very much. I've had a YouTube channel for several years, and needless to say, I haven't made enough money off of YouTube for them to justify sending me a paycheck. It's really one of those things where only the people who are getting lots of views are getting any money off of YouTube. But nonetheless, it's just one of those things where if you're trying to pass my work off as your own and trying to sell it, yeah, that's illegal and I'm going to go after you. But if I put this up on Tumblr and you want to use it to kind of illustrate something, all I would really ask for out of that is, hey, credit me. Hey, let them people know, hey, this photo was made by me. If you're interested in my work, go to my website, check out my stuff, contact me, and see if you want to do those other things. Now, there's other issues that kind of come up with that with, say, photojournalism. Say if your work got appropriated by a political campaign and, as a journalist, you're supposed to be incredibly neutral in political campaigns, and a campaign is using your photos and you don't want your name ending up on the books. Like if you approach them saying, hey, you used my photo for your political campaign, I want to be compensated for that, that can be a little bit problematic, because if your name ends up on the books for a political campaign, you suddenly are put on the defensive of, hey, why is this political campaign paying you? And it becomes a question of ethics and concerns. We live in a time where copyright is very complicated. There's a lot of people who are kind of clamoring for a change in copyright law. I'm a little bit worried if there is a change in copyright law, because we don't know which change it's going to go. Is it going to go on the side of the copyright owners and make it to where it's impossible for people to take content and trying to change it and make it their own? Or is it going to go on the side of fair use, where people can just take an image and do whatever they want with it? It's a very complicated issue. It's not an issue that's going to be solved anytime soon, in my opinion. But I think an important thing is for people to be educated on what the issues are and how it is. If you are a content creator, if you're a photographer, a videographer, a musician, protect your copyright. Get your stuff registered. Keep track of your beats and who would be using your content. Just be careful, and that's the main thing I think people need to take away for this is if you're going to create content, make sure you're protected and just have as much